I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. 3 years ago, if someone had told me what my own son would do to me, I would have laughed in their face. David was my pride and joy, my only child. I raised him by myself after his father walked out when he was just 7 years old. I worked 2 jobs to put that boy through college, 2 jobs. I was a secretary during the day and cleaned offices at night. My hands were raw from all the chemicals. My back ached constantly, but I told myself it was worth it. David was going to have the opportunities I never had. He was going to be somebody. And he was. He became a successful real estate agent, married a lovely girl named Jennifer, had 2 beautiful children. I was so proud. I thought I'd done everything right as a mother. I thought we were close. I lived in the same house for 43 years, the house where David grew up, a modest 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street that I'd saved every penny to buy. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd paid off the mortgage 5 years early by working overtime and never taking vacations. That house represented everything I'd worked for. When I turned 75, I started having some health issues. Nothing too serious, just arthritis in my knees and some balance problems. The doctor said it was normal for my age. I was managing fine on my own, thank you very much. I'd been independent my whole life. I wasn't about to change that now. But David started visiting more often, and at first I was thrilled. Finally, my busy son was making time for his old mother. We'd sit in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd helped him with homework every night, and he'd ask about my health, my finances, whether I was eating properly. "Mum, I worry about you living alone," he'd say, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "What if you fall? What if something happens?" I'd brush off his concerns. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I've been taking care of myself for 75 years. I think I can manage." But he kept pushing. Jennifer would come with him sometimes, and she'd look around my house with this expression, I can't quite describe it, like she was appraising something, taking inventory. The conversation started getting more specific. David would mention how much my house was worth now. "Mum, do you know what houses in this neighborhood are selling for? Mrs. Peterson's place went for $350,000 last month. Yours could probably get 400, maybe more." I didn't understand why he kept bringing it up. I wasn't planning to sell. This was my home. Then came the incident. I was reaching for a bowl on a high shelf in my kitchen when I lost my balance and fell. It wasn't serious, just a bruised hip and some scraped knees, but my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, heard me cry out and called David. He rushed over, and you'd think from his reaction that I'd been hit by a truck. "Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You could have broken your hip. You could have been lying there for hours." I tried to explain that it was just a minor accident, that these things happen, but he wouldn't listen. Jennifer was there too, shaking her head with this "I told you so" expression. That's when David first brought up Sunset Manor. "It's not what you think, Mom," he said, pulling out a glossy brochure. "This isn't like those old nursing homes. It's assisted living. You'd have your own apartment, but there'd be people there to help you. You'd have activities, meals prepared for you, medical care right on site." I looked at the brochure. The place looked nice enough. I'll give him that. but it wasn't my home. I don't need assisted living, I told him firmly. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. But Mom, what about the next time you fall? What if it's worse? There won't be a next time. I'll be more careful. But David had made up his mind. Over the next few weeks, he visited constantly, always bringing up my situation. He'd point out every little thing, a spider web in the corner, dust on a shelf, the way I moved a little slower getting up from my chair. You're not getting any younger, Mum. This house is too much for you to maintain. And honestly, keeping all that equity tied up in real estate doesn't make financial sense. Financial sense. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't really about my safety. This was about my house. But I still didn't want to believe it. This was my son. My David. The boy I'd sacrificed everything for. The pressure intensified. David started bringing Jennifer's mother, Carol, to visit me. Carol had moved to assisted living the year before, and she'd gush about how wonderful it was. "Oh, Margaret, you'd love it," she'd say. "I don't have to worry about cooking or cleaning anymore. There are bridge games every Tuesday, and the staff is so friendly." It felt orchestrated, like they were all working together to convince me to give up my independence. Then David played his trump card. He brought my grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, to visit. They were 10 and 12 then, and I adored them. But this visit felt different. "Grandma," Emma said, sitting next to me on my old couch. "Daddy says you might move to a new place where there are other grandmas and grandpas to play with." My heart sank. He was using my own grandchildren to manipulate me. Tyler, my serious little grandson, added, "Dad says your house is too big for just you, and it makes you sad to be here all alone." I wasn't sad. I wasn't lonely. I had my neighbours, my garden, my routines. This house wasn't too big. It was full of memories. But looking at their sweet faces, I could see they genuinely thought this move would be good for me. David had convinced them that their grandmother was suffering, that she needed to be rescued. That night after they left, I sat in my living room and cried. I felt so alone, so misunderstood. Maybe David was right. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe I couldn't see clearly anymore. The next morning David called. "Mum, I've been thinking, why don't we go visit Sunset Manor together? Just to look around. No pressure." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Sunset Manor was everything the brochure promised. Clean, modern, cheerful. The staff was friendly. The residents seemed content. David walked beside me, pointing out all the amenities. "Look at this, Mum. They have a library, a fitness centre, even a beauty salon. You love getting your hair done." The apartment they showed us was nice enough. A small living room, bedroom, kitchenette, and bathroom. Everything you'd need, the director explained, but without the burden of maintaining a whole house. "The monthly fee covers everything," she said. "Meals, housekeeping, activities, transportation to doctor's appointments. It's really quite reasonable when you consider what you'd save on utilities, property taxes, home maintenance." David was nodding enthusiastically. "See, Mom? It makes perfect sense." But it didn't feel like sense to me. It felt like giving up. On the drive home, I told David I needed time to think about it. "Of course," he said. "But Mum, don't take too long. They have a waiting list and this particular apartment won't be available forever." More pressure, always more pressure. Over the next week I tried to imagine myself living at Sunset Manor. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I could make friends there. Maybe I was being foolish, clinging to a house that was becoming too much for me. But every time I walked through my home, touching the walls I'd painted myself, looking at the garden I'd tended for decades, I felt like I'd be betraying everything I'd worked for. Then David presented me with papers. "I've been talking to my lawyer friend, Mom. We can set up a power of attorney arrangement so I can help you manage your affairs. And I found a buyer for the house." My blood ran cold. "A buyer? David, I haven't agreed to sell." "Mom, be realistic. If you're going to move to Sunset Manor, you need to liquidate your assets. The house is just sitting here, costing you money in taxes and maintenance. This buyer is offering $420,000. That's more than we expected." $420,000 for the house I'd bought for $38,000. The house where I'd raised my son, where I'd built my life. "I don't want to sell," I said, quietly. "Mom." David's voice took on that patient tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "You're not thinking clearly. This is a good offer. With that money invested properly, you'll have more than enough to cover your expenses at Sunset Manor for the rest of your life." "And what happens to what's left when I die?" I asked. David looked uncomfortable. "Well, naturally, as your heir." There it was, the truth I'd been trying not to see. David wasn't concerned about my welfare. He was concerned about his inheritance. He wanted me out of the house so he could get his hands on the money now while he could benefit from it. But I was still his mother. I still loved him. I still wanted to believe the best of him. "Let me think about it," I said. "Mum, I really think we should move on this. The buyer wants to close quickly, and Sunset Manor is holding that apartment for you. But not forever." Everything was happening so fast. Too fast. I felt overwhelmed, confused. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe David really did know what was best for me. That night, I called my sister Rose in Florida. Rose was 3 years older than me and had always been the practical one. "Rosie," I said, "David wants me to sell the house and move to assisted living." There was a long pause. "Do you want to move?" "Number? But maybe I should. Maybe I'm just being stubborn." "Margaret, listen to me. You're sharper than women half your age. You're healthy except for a little arthritis. You're not ready for assisted living. But David says." "I don't care what David says. It's your life, your house, your decision. Don't let anyone pressure you into anything." But the pressure continued. David visited almost daily now, always with some new argument for why I needed to move immediately. "Mom, I talked to the facility director. They have 3 families on the waiting list for that apartment. If you don't take it now, you might not get another chance for months." The market is really hot right now, Mom. If we wait too long, house prices might drop. I'm worried about you, Mom. What if you have another fall? What if something worse happens? Finally, worn down by weeks of constant pressure, I agreed to move to Sunset Manor. But I insisted on one condition. I wanted to rent out my house instead of selling it. Mum, that's not practical. You don't want to be a landlord at your age. What if the tenants don't pay? What if they damage the property? Then you can help me manage it, I said. David looked frustrated, but he agreed. At least I thought he agreed. The move happened quickly after that, too quickly. David arranged everything, the movers, the storage unit for my extra furniture, the paperwork with Sunset Manor. I felt like I was caught in a whirlwind. On my last night in my house, I sat in my empty living room and wept. 43 years of memories, boxed up and carted away. My garden, which I'd tended so carefully, left to whoever would live here next. David found me there. Mum, this is for the best. You'll be so much happier at Sunset Manor. You'll see. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The first few weeks at Sunset Manor weren't terrible. The staff was kind, the food was decent, and I did meet some nice people, but it wasn't home. It was a place where old people went to wait to die. I called David regularly to ask about my house. How's the rental going? Have you found good tenants? I'm working on it, Mom. The market's a little slow right now. But something felt off. When I asked for specifics, how much rent we were asking, what kind of tenants he was screening, David was always vague. Don't worry about the details, Mom. I'm handling everything. 3 months after I moved to Sunset Manor, I was having lunch with my new friend Eleanor when she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. My daughter drives by your old neighborhood sometimes, she said. She mentioned that the house on Maple Street with the beautiful rose garden sold a few months ago. New family moved in. Nice young couple with a baby. My fork clattered to my plate. Sold? Yes, she said it went very quickly. Cash sale, I think. I couldn't breathe. I excused myself and went back to my apartment, my hands shaking as I dialed David's number. David, Eleanor says my house was sold. There was a pause. Mom, we need to talk. I was going to tell you. Tell me what? The buyer from before came back with an even better offer. 450,000. It was too good to pass up. You sold my house without telling me. Mom, you signed the power of attorney papers. You gave me the authority to handle your affairs. I felt like the world was spinning. I gave you power of attorney to help me manage my affairs, not to sell my house behind my back. Mom, calm down. This was the right decision. The money is safely invested. You'll never have to worry about finances again. I want to see the paperwork. I want to see where my money is. Of course. I'll bring everything by this weekend. But David didn't come that weekend, or the next. When I called, Jennifer answered. "He's been so busy with work, Margaret. I'm sure he'll get by soon." Something was very wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I asked Eleanor if her daughter could drive me to my old neighborhood. I needed to see for myself. The drive to Maple Street felt like a funeral procession. When we turned onto my street, I gasped. There was my house, but it looked completely different. The new owners had painted it a soft yellow instead of the white I'd maintained for decades. They'd redone the landscaping, replacing my rose garden with modern plantings. But it was definitely sold. There was a young family there, just like Eleanor had said. I watched through the car window as a woman pushed a stroller up the driveway, and I felt like I was watching strangers living in my grave. "I want to go to David's house," I told Eleanor's daughter. David lived in a beautiful colonial about 20 minutes away. When we pulled up, I was shocked to see construction workers in the driveway. They were building an addition onto the house, a big one. Eleanor's daughter waited while I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Jennifer answered, looking surprised and uncomfortable to see me. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" "I came to see David. We need to talk about my house. He's not home right now. He's showing a property." I looked past her into their house. It was completely redecorated. New furniture, new flooring, new everything. "Nice renovations," I said. Jennifer's face flushed. "Yes, well, we've been saving up. Saving up. Right." I spent the next week making phone calls. I called the county records office to find out exactly when my house had been sold and for how much. I called my old bank to ask about my accounts. I even called a lawyer, not David's lawyer friend, but a different one I found in the phone book. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. My house had been sold 5 months ago, just 2 months after I moved to Sunset Manor. Not only had David lied about trying to rent it, he'd been planning to sell it all along. The sale price wasn't $450,000. It was $475,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he'd done with my money. According to the bank, a large portion of the proceeds had been transferred to David's personal account. When I asked about my investment portfolio that David claimed to have set up, there was no record of it. David had stolen my money. My own son had stolen my life savings. The lawyer I consulted was a sharp woman named Patricia Winters. She listened to my story with growing anger. "Mrs. Henderson, I have to ask, do you have any documentation about your son's authority to sell your property?" I showed her the power of attorney papers David had given me to sign. Patricia read them carefully, frowning. "This power of attorney is very limited," she said. "It gives him authority to help manage your day-to-day finances and medical decisions, but it specifically excludes major property transactions without your written consent." "What does that mean?" "It means your son had no legal authority to sell your house, and if he used the proceeds for his own benefit instead of yours, that's theft. Elder abuse, actually." elder abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son had abused me. What can I do? I asked. We can file a lawsuit to recover your money. We can also file criminal charges. The evidence seems pretty clear-cut. I felt overwhelmed. Sue my own son. Have him arrested. He was still my child, despite what he'd done. I need to think about this, I said. Of course. But Mrs. Henderson, don't wait too long. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes to recover assets that have been spent. I went back to Sunset Manor in a daze. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the little boy I'd raised, the child I'd worked 2 jobs to support. How had he become someone who could steal from his own mother? David finally came to visit me 3 days later, bringing flowers and wearing his most charming smile. Sorry I haven't been by, Mum. Work's been crazy. I looked at him sitting across from me in my tiny living room, and I saw a stranger. I know about the house, David. His smile faltered. What do you mean? I know you sold it 5 months ago. I know you lied to me about renting it. I know you took my money. David's face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, then anger. Mum, you're confused. I did what was best for you. The money is safe. It's invested. Where? Show me the investment accounts. I don't have those papers with me. Then bring them tomorrow. Mum, you need to trust me. I'm your son. I would never do anything to hurt you. But he had hurt me more than I ever thought possible. David, I want my money back. It's not that simple, Mum. The money is tied up in long-term investments. I can't just liquidate everything without penalties. More lies. I could see it in his eyes. Then we have a problem, I said quietly. David left angry that day, and I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. No visits, no phone calls. It was like I'd ceased to exist for him. I spent those 2 weeks thinking. I thought about the life I'd built, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given my son. I thought about how he'd repaid that love by stealing from me and warehousing me in a facility so he could get his hands on my money. And I got angry, really truly angry. I called Patricia Winters and told her I was ready to proceed with legal action. I want my money back, I said. All of it. And I want my son to face consequences for what he's done. Are you sure, Mrs. Henderson? This will likely destroy your relationship with your son permanently. I thought about that. Was I prepared to lose David forever? Then I realized I'd already lost him. The David I'd raised, the son I'd loved, would never have done this to me. That person was gone, maybe had never really existed at all. I'm sure, I said. The lawsuit took 18 months to resolve. It was brutal. David hired his own lawyer and fought me every step of the way. He claimed I was senile, that I'd agreed to all his financial decisions, that I was being manipulated by my lawyer. The worst part was that he turned my grandchildren against me. Emma and Tyler stopped visiting, stopped calling. When I asked David about them, he said they were disappointed in Grandma's behavior. He'd poisoned them against me, just like he'd manipulated them to support moving me to the nursing home. But Patricia was right. The evidence was clear. David had exceeded his legal authority and used my money for his own benefit. The judge ruled in my favor and ordered him to repay everything he'd taken, plus interest and legal fees. The problem was David had spent most of the money. The house addition, the new cars, the renovations, expensive vacations, it was all gone. He'll have to liquidate assets to pay the judgment. Patricia explained. His house, his business, investments, whatever it takes. What if he doesn't have enough? Then he could face criminal charges, grand theft, elder abuse. He's looking at serious jail time. I didn't want my son to go to prison, but I also wasn't going to let him get away with what he'd done. The resolution came from an unexpected source. Jennifer. She called me one evening crying. "Margaret, I need to talk to you. Can I come see you?" She arrived an hour later, looking haggard and exhausted. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "I swear to you, I didn't know David had stolen your money." I studied her face. I'd always liked Jennifer, and she seemed genuinely distraught. "I thought the house renovations were from David's business success," she continued. "I thought the money was from your house sale, legally handled. When the lawsuit started and I saw the actual paperwork, I was horrified." She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. "David's been hiding assets, trying to shield them from the judgment. But I made copies of everything, bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds. It's all here." I looked through the papers. David had been very busy trying to hide my money. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. Jennifer started crying again. "Because it's wrong. What he did to you is wrong. And because," she took a shaky breath, "because I can't stay married to someone who would steal from his own mother. I've filed for divorce." The hidden assets Jennifer revealed were enough to cover everything David owed me, plus damages. Faced with the prospect of criminal charges and the loss of everything in his divorce, David finally agreed to pay. But he didn't just pay me back. Through his lawyer, he made an offer that shocked everyone. David owned several rental properties, investments he'd made with his real estate commissions over the years. He offered to sign over the title to one of them to me as part of the settlement. Why would he do that? I asked Patricia. Probably because he's desperate to avoid jail time. Transferring property to you as restitution might convince the prosecutor not to file criminal charges. The property he was offering was a beautiful 2-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It was worth about $300,000, not as much as my original house, but substantial. "What do you think?" Patricia asked. I thought about it for a long time. I could take the house, or I could push for David to face criminal prosecution. "I'll take the house," I said, finally. but I have conditions. The conditions were simple. David had to transfer the house to me free and clear, no mortgage. He had to pay all my legal fees, and he had to write me a letter acknowledging what he'd done and apologizing. The apology letter arrived a week before the house transfer was finalized. It was short and formal, written by his lawyer, but it was something. I acknowledge that I exceeded my authority as power of attorney and used proceeds from the sale of your house for my own benefit without your knowledge or consent. I apologize for the pain and betrayal this caused you. I accept full responsibility for my actions. It wasn't much, but it was an admission of guilt in writing. The day I got the keys to my new house, I left Sunset Manor. After 2 years of living in that tiny apartment, walking into a real home again felt like resurrection. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, a small but lovely backyard. It was move-in ready and came fully furnished. David had been renting it to a family who'd just moved out. But the best part wasn't the house itself. It was what it represented. My independence, my dignity, my refusal to be a victim. I hired a property management company to handle the rental. The house generates enough income each month to cover all my living expenses and then some. I don't have to rely on anyone for financial support. I'm completely self-sufficient again. 6 months after I moved into my new house, I got an unexpected visitor. Emma, my granddaughter, now 13 and much more mature than when I'd last seen her. She stood on my front porch looking nervous and uncertain. "Hi, Grandma." "Emma, sweetheart, come in. How did you find me?" "Mom gave me your address. She said I should hear your side of what happened." We sat in my living room, and I told Emma everything, not the angry version, not the bitter version, but the truth, how her father had pressured me to move to the nursing home, how he'd sold my house without permission, how he'd taken my money. Emma listened quietly, and when I finished, she was crying. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. Dad told us you were being mean to him, that you were trying to take away our college funds." "Your college funds?" "He said the lawsuit was going to bankrupt him, and we wouldn't be able to go to college." Another lie. David's business was successful enough to support his family without stealing from his mother. "Sweetheart, I would never do anything to hurt your future. Your education has always been important to me." Emma hugged me then, and I felt like I'd gotten my granddaughter back. Over the next few months, both Emma and Tyler started visiting me regularly. Jennifer would drop them off on weekends. They never talked about David. I think that was still too painful and complicated for them. But they were happy to have their grandmother back in their lives. Jennifer and I developed a friendship too. She was struggling as a single mother, trying to rebuild her life after divorcing David. I found myself in the odd position of supporting my former daughter-in-law through her divorce from my son. "I feel so guilty," she told me one day over coffee. "I benefited from what David did to you. The house renovations, the vacations, all of it was paid for with your money." "You didn't know," I assured her, "and you did the right thing when you found out. But still..." Jennifer, you gave me back my grandchildren. You helped me get justice. I can never repay you for that. David himself has never contacted me since the settlement was finalized. I heard through the grapevine that he'd had to sell his house to cover the divorce settlement and remaining debts. He moved to a smaller place across town, and his real estate business struggled after word got out about what he'd done to me. I can't say I felt sorry for him. Do I miss my son? I miss the son I thought I had. I miss the little boy who used to help me in my garden and tell me about his day at school. But that person, if he ever really existed, was gone long before our legal battle. What I have now is better than what I had before. I have my independence back. I have my dignity. I have a home that's truly mine, that no one can take away from me. I have my grandchildren in my life again. I have the satisfaction of knowing that I fought back when someone tried to take advantage of me. And perhaps most importantly, I have my story, because what happened to me happens to a lot of elderly people, adult children who see their parents as inconvenient obstacles to their inheritance, families who manipulate and pressure older relatives into giving up their independence. I was lucky. I had the resources to fight back, and I had people like Patricia and Jennifer who helped me. A lot of elderly people in my situation don't have those advantages. That's why I'm telling my story now, to let other people know that you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to accept mistreatment, even from your own family. You have rights, and there are people who will help you protect those rights. I'm 78 years old now, and I'm living my best life. I have book club on Tuesdays. I volunteer at the animal shelter on Thursdays, and I'm learning to paint watercolors. My garden is small but thriving. I have good neighbors who check on me, but not because they think I'm helpless, because that's what good neighbors do. Emma is a sophomore in high school now, and she's been helping me learn to use social media. She says I should share my story online, that other people need to hear it. Maybe she's right. Tyler is in 8th grade and has been teaching me to play chess. He's much better than I am, but I'm improving. Last week I almost beat him. He was so proud of me for putting up a good fight. Jennifer remarried last year to a kind man who treats her and the children well. They invited me to the wedding, and I was honored to be there. David wasn't invited, which probably should have made me sad, but honestly it was better without him. No drama, no tension, just celebration. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pursuing legal action against my son, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is no, absolutely not. What David did to me wasn't just theft, it was betrayal of the deepest kind. He took advantage of my trust, my love for him, my desire to be a good mother. He manipulated my grandchildren and isolated me from my family. He tried to steal not just my money, but my dignity and independence. If I'd let him get away with it, what kind of message would that have sent? That it's okay to abuse elderly people as long as you're family. That love means being a doormat. Love means having standards. Love means holding people accountable when they hurt you. Love means protecting yourself so you can continue to be there for the people who actually care about you. My son made his choices. I made mine. I chose to fight back, to reclaim my life, to show my grandchildren that their grandmother wasn't a helpless victim to be pitied or ignored. And you know what? It was the right choice. I'm sitting in my living room right now, looking out at my little garden where the roses are just starting to bloom. Next week, Emma is coming over to help me plant vegetables. Tyler is going to teach me a new chess strategy. Jennifer and I are planning to take a day trip to visit some art galleries. This is what victory looks like. Not revenge, not bitterness, but a life reclaimed, a future chosen freely, not imposed by someone else's greed or manipulation. If my story helps even one person stand up for themselves, helps one family member think twice before taking advantage of an elderly relative, helps one person recognize that growing older doesn't mean giving up your rights or your dignity, then it will have been worth telling. Because here's what I learned. It's never too late to fight for yourself. It's never too late to demand better. It's never too late to reclaim your life. My son threw me in a nursing home to get his hands on my house. Now I own his house. But more than that, I own my life again. And that's worth more than any house, any amount of money. That's justice. That's what fighting back looks like. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.